Aloha. What you know about health, what you believe keeps you healthy, is almost entirely wrong. And that's because most people believe that their individual health is the result of biology or their access to the healthcare system. In other words, what's in your genes? Do you have insurance or a doctor to take care of you? When the truth is that by almost 2 to 1, a variety of social factors have a much larger effect on your health. These social factors include things like education, income, where you live, the environment, and your social status. Ultimately, your zip code is a far better indicator than your genetic code in determining how long you will live and how healthy a life it will be. And there is a wealth of global data showing conclusively the essential relationship and very intimate connection between these social factors and the health of a population. But if we're here today to talk about cultivating community, the relevant question is this: what kind of health have we been cultivating in the communities throughout our state? If we examine 2 of the more prominent and readily measured of these social factors, income and education, and compare it to the health data for Hawaii, the result is a sobering indictment of our actions. Because in Hawaii, people who live in poverty are 3 times as likely to have diabetes and twice as likely to have hypertension. These are among the costliest of the chronic diseases. Likewise, people with a high school degree or less are twice as likely to be obese and 3 times as likely to smoke. These are the canaries in the coal mine that we have been ignoring for far too long. Because in our rush to modernize, to hyper-individualize our societies, we have willfully forgotten the wisdom of our ancestors. Whether it was Pacific Island cultures, Native American cultures, ancient European, African, Asian cultures, they all understood that the health of our habitats directly affected the health of our people, that everything was connected. They all understood that health is everything. There's a native Hawaiian saying, "Mohala I kawai, kamaka o kapua." Flowers thrive where there's water, just as people thrive where living conditions are good. Just as people thrive where living conditions are good. You say it out loud, you hear it, you see it up there on the screen, and it seems kind of obvious, despite the fact that we are not following this wisdom. And the reason why a statement like this seems obvious to us is because we know this to be true. Intrinsically, we know that much of who we are, much of what we become over the course of our lives is influenced significantly by the environments in which we live, and therefore the experiences of our lives in those environments. When I think about how I came to be standing here on this stage today, it is a journey informed from a lifetime of lessons about environment. I grew up in poverty in a small rural community called Waimanalo. And growing up, I looked at the world through the lens of individualism, because growing up in the country, that's what was expected of you. You would handle your own problems in a blaze of self-reliance. But that meant whenever I saw other people, other neighbors, other communities that were experiencing some kind of hardship, my view at the time was that those folks just needed to do what we were doing, which was to suck it up and pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, the essence of rugged individualism. It never occurred to me as a boy that for some people, no matter how hard they work, no matter how long they try, no matter how sincere they were about changing and improving the circumstances of their lives, that they would be burdened forever by the biology of their disadvantage. That they live under an umbrella of inequality that darkens everything in their lives, whether it stems from political inequality, social inequality, civil inequality, or massive economic inequality. I didn't understand as a boy that maybe the reason why some people weren't pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps isn't because they're lazy. It's because they didn't even have boots. But as I got older, As I lived in different communities, I was exposed to a much different kind of environment where I saw the true interconnected nature of the world and came to understand that we cannot build a just, equitable, thriving, or healthy society based on the notion of every man for himself. Came to understand very clearly that the strength of community is more than just a diversity of individuals, but how those individuals work together to solve big problems. And improving our health by addressing the social origins of our health, whether it's the education system, income disparity, housing, transportation, energy, the environment, those are all big problems. And that's how I came to be on this stage today, after making a documentary film about health in Hawaii and the social origins of our health. It's a documentary film called Ola. Ola is a native Hawaiian word. It means life and well-being. And in the film, we start a conversation about the social causes of our health here in Hawaii. But just as important, we talk about hope. Because as challenging as it's going to be to try to address these social issues as a means to improving our health, as challenging as that is going to be, hope is sprouting up everywhere across our state. And somewhere at the intersection of health and hope are lessons for all of us in how to create that just, equitable, thriving, and healthy community. So, today, I'd like to share just a few stories from Ola. The first of which is about a place called Mauna. Mauna is an organic farm in Waianae, and it was created by a gentleman named Surya, who, at a very young age, lost everything when his father was assassinated right in front of his family, right in his own home. After lighting the fire of his own father's cremation, Surya set off on foot, walking overland from India all the way to Northern Europe and back again, spending years trying to find peace, but also trying to find purpose to a life that had begun with such a senseless act of violence. And what he found in Waianae was more than just a purpose. He found a duty to help others who had been so willing to help him when he first arrived here, despite the fact that they themselves have very little. When he looked around his adopted community, he saw families living in poverty, homeless people living on the beach, and children who lacked access to basic nutrition. And so he decided he needed to create Mauna Farm. Now, you could probably put on a blindfold and throw a dart at a map of Hawaii and hit an organic farm, couldn't you? It is suddenly the vogue thing to do. But Surya was determined that this place would be completely different, that it would be about people, not profit, about service, not celebrity. So at Mauna Farm, he gives his food away, all of it. His organic, fresh fruits and vegetables, gives it away to whoever comes. You do not leave Mauna empty-handed. And to the children who come to the farm, he teaches them how to plant, how to cultivate, how to harvest, and then how to cook nutritious meals with the food that they themselves just plucked from the earth. But it is more than just giving food away. He is teaching the children of Waianae the special miracle of planting a seed, of nurturing it, and then sharing in the abundance of your effort with others. In his words, simple living, very high thinking. On his journeys, what Surya found was a place and a community that allowed him to actualize the purpose of his life. That is to give and to serve and to love others unconditionally. And the children and the families of Waianae are now able to lead healthier and more complete lives because of it. The next story comes from a place called Kea'au on the Big Island. You know, today teachers and students are so consumed with test scores and achievement results that one of the things many of us took for granted growing up doesn't really exist anymore, and that is regular, consistent exercise through PE classes. And so a teacher there, a runner named Miley, decided that that was unacceptable. So she galvanized her fellow teachers, the students, and the parents at Ke'au Elementary to support and participate in a program called the Mighty Milers. Under the Mighty Milers program, the kids there now run every week. They use their math skills to track progress against individual goals, and collectively, they have run tens of thousands of miles together. Before this program, this school had very low test scores and very high rates of absenteeism. And now, just through the simple act of running every week, which, by the way, is free, the kids there now are less stressed and more active. They're more eager to come to school, and they're more engaged when they get there. So that today, Ke'au Elementary School has the highest test scores and the lowest rates of absenteeism of any school in the complex. But even more important than that, this program is teaching the children a lifelong pattern of wellness and associating exercise and coming to school with feeling good about themselves, both physically and mentally. Finally, the last story from the film is about a town called Hana. Given its relative isolation, there's very limited opportunities in a town like Hana, especially for the youth who grow up there. But a man named Rick decided that he wanted to teach the high schoolers in Hana some life skills and encourage them to develop a sense of self-worth by using those life skills not just for their own opportunity, but to give back to a town that they are such an important part of. Rick wanted to teach these high schoolers what he knows, and what Rick knows is building. Think about how challenging it is to lead a healthy lifestyle when you don't know whether or not you have safe shelter to live in. This is especially important in a town like Hana, where the homes are 80 years old, going back to the plantation era. So Rick taught these kids how to retrofit, how to renovate, how to rebuild homes for dozens and dozens and dozens of families in Hana. Families whose homes were bursting at the seams because they had 3 and 4 generations living under one roof now have extra rooms to spread out in. Families who were living off the grid without ready access to hot water now have custom tile showers and 120-gallon solar water heaters. And the elderly, the kupuna whose homes were falling apart all around them, now have handicap access and ramps and safety bars in their home, allowing them to age in place where they live. They were learning more than just how to rebuild homes. They were learning how to rebuild the lives of people most important to them. And that was never more apparent than a few years ago when on the Sunday before Thanksgiving, the house of one of their classmates was destroyed in a fire. And these high schoolers, on their own, decided that they were going to marshal together lumber and hardware stores, truckers and hotels to gather the material and the resources they would need to help rebuild that house. And so it came to be on the Friday after Thanksgiving that a couple dozen kids led a team of 50 and started to work for 3 days straight in a rainstorm that never stopped, so that on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, just 7 days after that house had burned to the ground, this family had a roof over its head and a safe place to live. And so I asked one of the kids in the program, what does something like this mean? What does it teach you about your role in the community? And he said, helping the community, it's all in your life. It's in the budget of living. I think about that kid a lot. Growing up in a community much like the one I did, and yet he sees the world so clearly. I think about how that could have been me if I had someone cultivating my community at that age. What these 3 stories from Ola teach us is that it is possible to overcome the biology of our disadvantage. These 3 stories from the film show us that we can cultivate community that allows us to improve the lives and therefore improve the health of the people who live there. You know, so often we come to these talks and conferences and seminars and we glamorize the problems, or worse, we pat ourselves on the back as we glamorize the solutions. These folks, they didn't do that. We shouldn't do that either. Instead, when you leave here today, just remember a few simple things. Remember that these islands are a gift, and that to protect that gift, we all need to be in this thing together. Remember that health is in everything you do and everything that you touch. Remember that you can cultivate community with a simple act. Read to a child, volunteer at a health center, plant a single seed. And when you wake up in the morning, remember to ask yourself, what do you care about? What kind of future should we be leaving to the next generation? And when you look yourself in the mirror, ask the question, what will you do to cultivate your community? Let's do this. Thank you very much.